Space Center Houston. The Space Center Houston is a science museum that serves as the official visitor center of NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. It was designated a Smithsonian affiliate museum in 2014. The organization is not owned by NASA and does not receive federal funds.
Welcome to Space Center Houston.
It is the cornerstone project of the nonprofit Manned Spaceflight Education Foundation, a 501c3 organization. The center opened in 1992, replacing the former Visitor Center in Johnson Space Center Building 2. The museum is 250,000 square feet and displays over 400 space artifacts, including the Mercury 9, Gemini 5, and Apollo 17 flown space capsules, and the only space shuttle visitors can walk inside. NASA stands for National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It is an independent agency of the U.S. federal government responsible for the United States Civil Space Program and for research in aeronautics and space exploration. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., NASA operates 10 field centers across the United States and is organized into mission directorates for science, space operations, exploration systems development, space technology, aeronautics research, and mission support. The Starship Gallery, the Tram Tour, the Mission Mars, the Space Center Theater, the International Space Station, the International Space Station, ISS, is a continuously inhabited research laboratory orbiting Earth since November 2000, making it one of the greatest engineering collaborations in human history. The International Space Station Gallery offers a realistic, human-scale view of living in microgravity, not just rockets and shiny spacecraft, but everyday life, experiments, and challenges faced by astronauts. Offers both science and human stories. See complex equipment and research setups, but also the human side, food, sleep, hygiene, daily routines. Helps connect our learning about space, past missions, spacecraft, future Mars ambitions, with what's happening right now aboard the ISS. In 2024, Northrop Grumman donated this full-size ground mock-up habitat module originally built for NASA's Lunar Orbit Station concept, the Future Gateway. The module dimensions are 14 feet in diameter and 21 feet long, weighs about 7,500 pounds. The installation was done so people can enter the habitat and see its interior layout. See an arrangement reminiscent of a space station interior, wall-mounted racks for science and equipment, a crew quarters, a sleeping rest area, and a control tower area that includes a water dispenser, Josh rehydration station for astronaut-style freeze-dried food, giving visitors a feel for what living in orbit or lunar orbit might be like. One hatch where a lunar lander could dock, another where a crewed spacecraft, like Orion spacecraft, would arrive, so we get a sense of how spacecraft connect in orbit around the moon. Essentially, it's a walk through spacecraft habitat, a rare chance for the public to experience something close to what astronauts might inhabit in future lunar missions. This part of the museum is the Artemis exhibit. This inflatable moon serves as a visual and experiential symbol, a fun, immersive way to connect visitors with lunar exploration. It's used alongside other interactive exhibits to help bring the moon and upcoming moon missions into a relatable human-scale experience. The NASA Crew Portrait Gallery. The Crew Portrait Wall recognizes every NASA astronaut who has flown in space, from the earliest pioneers to present-day station crews. Artemis is taking the first woman and the first person of color to the moon. Now we are in the Mission Briefing Center. The Mission Briefing Center is an immersive educational theater-style experience inside Space Center Houston. It's designed to simulate the feeling of being part of a real NASA mission, giving visitors a taste of astronaut training, mission preparation, and real-time mission control communications. Think of it as a mini mission control or astronaut pre-flight briefing brought down to Earth for public education. The day of our visit, we listened to a presentation by Colonel William Bill MacArthur, U.S. Army, NASA astronaut. The theme was Breakfast with an Astronaut. Bill MacArthur is a retired U.S. Army colonel and former NASA astronaut. He has a Bachelor of Science in Applied Science and Engineering from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1973 and a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1983. Before joining NASA, MacArthur served in the U.S. Army as an Army aviator, with tours that included service with the 82nd Airborne Division, among other units. MacArthur was selected by NASA as an astronaut candidate in January 1990 and completed training in July 1991. Over his career, he flew 4 space missions, 3 aboard the Space Shuttle and his final mission via Soyuz to the International Space Station, ISS. Now let us take a tram tour to the rocket park.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome on to our tram tour today. Please make sure you're remaining seated at all times. If you are traveling with any small kids and their feet don't fully reach the floor, please make sure that they are seated in a center seat and not on a seat on the edge. All right, it looks like everybody is remaining seated, so we should be all clear.
The Tram Tour is a guided, open-air shuttle bus experience that takes visitors behind the scenes at the NASA Johnson Space Center. The tour offers a mix of historical, educational, and operational insights, showing parts of NASA we usually cannot access on our own. For this visit, we are just doing the historic rocket park.
Look over to your right-hand side to this big white warehouse-like building with a Saturn V outline on it. This building and its surrounding area make up the George W. S. Abbey Rocket Park, our destination today. Inside of this building is a real Saturn V rocket. In fact, it is the only Saturn V rocket left on display in the entire world that is all real and all flight certified. It is made of pieces in the 3 canceled Apollo missions, Apollo 18, 19, and 20.
Rocket Park is an outdoor exhibition area at Space Center Houston, featuring real rockets and historical spacecraft. It showcases the engineering achievements of NASA's Apollo and Space Shuttle programs and gives visitors a tangible sense of scale. This is the real full-scale Saturn V, the rocket that took astronauts to the moon during the Apollo program. The Saturn V is the massive launch vehicle used in NASA's Apollo program to send astronauts to the moon. It remains the tallest, heaviest, and most powerful rocket ever flown successfully. The height is 363 foot. The weight at launch is 6.2 million pounds. The payload to low Earth orbit is 260,000 pounds. At Space Center Houston, the Saturn V is displayed horizontally to allow visitors to see its stages, engines, and internal structure up close. They are 3 stages: S1C, the first stage, massive engines that lift the rocket off the ground. S2, the second stage, continues propulsion after first stage separation. S4B, the third stage, carries the Apollo spacecraft and lunar module toward the moon. During the first stage, more than 90% of the mass at launch was propellant, in this case, RP-1 rocket fuel and liquid oxygen oxidizer. It was 138 foot tall and 33 foot in diameter. The stage provided 7,750,000 pound force of thrust at sea level to get the rocket through the first 38 miles of ascent. The stage had 5 F1 engines in a quincunx arrangement. The center engine was fixed in position, while the 4 outer engines could be hydraulically gimbaled to control the rocket. During the second stage, using liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, it had 5 J2 engines in a quincunx pattern. The second stage accelerated the Saturn V through the upper atmosphere with 1 million pounds force of thrust. During the third stage, which had just 1 J2 rocket engine, for lunar missions, it was fired twice. First for Earth orbit insertion after second stage cutoff, and then for translunar injection. This is the Apollo 13 bronze statue. National Historic Mechanical Engineering Landmark, Saturn V rocket, 1967 to 1973. The Saturn V is a retired American super heavy lift launch vehicle developed by NASA under the Apollo program for human exploration of the moon. The rocket was human-rated, had 3 stages, and was powered by liquid fuel, Flown from 1967 to 1973, it was used for 9 crewed flights to the moon and to launch Skylab, the first American space station. As of 2025, the Saturn V remains the only launch vehicle to have carried humans beyond low Earth orbit. The Saturn V holds the record for the largest payload capacity to low Earth orbit, 310,000 pounds, which included unburned propellant needed to send the Apollo Command and Service Module and Lunar Module to the Moon. The largest production model of the Saturn family of rockets, the Saturn V was designed under the direction of Wernher von Braun at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The lead contractors for construction of the rocket were Boeing, North American Aviation, Douglas Aircraft Company, and IBM. 15 flight-capable vehicles were built, not counting 3 used for ground testing. A total of 13 missions were launched from Kennedy Space Center, 9 of which carried 24 astronauts to the moon from Apollo 8 to Apollo 17. The Saturn rocket family were named after the 6th planet from the Sun because the design of the various Saturn rockets evolved from the earlier Jupiter vehicles, which were named after the 5th planet from the Sun. Between 1960 and 1962, the Marshall Space Flight Center designed a series of Saturn rockets that could be deployed for Earth orbit and lunar missions. NASA planned to use a Saturn vehicle as part of the Earth orbit rendezvous method for a lunar mission. Development on the Saturn C3 rocket was just beginning when the MSFC planned an even bigger rocket, the Saturn C4, which would use 4 F1 engines in its first stage and 5 J2 engines in its second stage. On January 25, 1962, NASA gave its approval to build the C5. The 3-stage rocket would consist of the S1C first stage, with 5 F1 engines, the S2 second stage with 5 J2 engines, and the S4B third stage with a single J2 engine. The C5 would undergo component testing even before the first model was constructed. Standing next to the Saturn V gives a visceral sense of the power and complexity of human spaceflight, shows how rockets work, how multi-stage design enables lunar missions, and connects engineering to astronaut experiences, represents the pinnacle of Apollo program engineering and humanity's first steps on the moon. The other places that the Tram Tour could take us are the Historic Mission Control, JSC. See the original Apollo Mission Control Room, where NASA monitored the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969. Includes vintage consoles, telemetry displays, and astronaut mission memorabilia. The Space Vehicle Mock-up Facility, SVMF, home to full-scale spacecraft replicas, training mock-ups, and modules. Features ISS modules, lunar habitat mock-ups, Orion spacecraft, and sometimes Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin exhibits. Visitors get an inside look at how astronauts train on real equipment before flying in space. The modern mission operations see where current and upcoming missions are prepared and managed. May include glimpse of astronaut crew quarters, shuttle training simulators, or mission Mars operations. The astronaut training areas. Some tours allow limited views of astronaut training pools, simulators, or centrifuge facilities, depending on operational schedules. You'll see how NASA prepares astronauts for microgravity, lunar, and Mars missions. And the one we just visit, the historic rocket park view, Saturn V rockets, Apollo-era vehicles, and other historical spacecraft outdoors. Learn about the engineering feats behind human spaceflight. We are back to the tram boarding area. Next stop, Independence Plaza. The Independence Plaza exhibit complex contains the world's only high-fidelity space shuttle replica, where it stands mounted on one of the two original shuttle carrier aircraft. Independence Plaza is the only place where the public can enter both vehicles. The Space Shuttle replica Independence, formerly known as Explorer, was previously located at Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, but was moved to make way for a new permanent attraction hall for Space Shuttle Atlantis. Independence is now displayed atop the retired shuttle carrier aircraft, NASA 905. On August 14, 2014, a heavy lift called the Rise of Independence was completed to place Independence on top of NASA 905. The plane was transported to Space Center Houston from Ellington Airport on April 30, 2014. Space Center Houston was briefly considered as a home for one of the retired Space Shuttle orbiters, but the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum, and California Science Center were instead selected. A NASA report showing the final scoring showed Space Center Houston finished 10th among 13 museums competing for the three orbiters, not already committed to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. This is a hands-on walkthrough experience that blends history, engineering, and astronautics. Visitors can explore both the orbiter and the aircraft, getting a sense of the scale and complexity of the shuttle program. The Shuttle Carrier Aircraft, SCA, is a modified Boeing 747 jetliner used by NASA to transport Space Shuttle orbiters from landing sites back to Kennedy Space Center in Florida. At Space Center Houston, the SCA is displayed with the Space Shuttle Independence mounted on top, forming the centerpiece of Independence Plaza. There were two SCAs built, NASA 905 and NASA 911, modified with structural reinforcements, struts, and attachment points for the shuttle. Mounting struts. The aircraft had three heavy-duty struts on the fuselage to attach the shuttle securely. Vertical stabilizers added twin vertical fins on the tail to stabilize the plane during shuttle transport. Structural reinforcements. Fuselage and wings strengthened to handle the weight 165,000 of a shuttle orbiter. Instrumentation. Extra avionics and monitoring systems were installed for safe ferry flights. Transport shuttle orbiters. After a shuttle landed at Edwards Air Force Base, California, or White Sands, New Mexico, the shuttle carrier aircraft, SCA, ferried it back to Kennedy Space Center. Support for shuttle program. Enabled maintenance, refurbishment, and preparation for the next launch. Demonstrated engineering ingenuity. The 747's modifications allowed a commercial jet to carry an enormous spacecraft safely, a unique solution in aerospace history. Shuttle carrier aircraft and space shuttle radio-controlled test models, NASA engineers John Kiker and Owen Morris built and flew radio-controlled models to test and demonstrate the piggyback concept. These models were used in preparation for the approach and landing tests, ALT. ALT Flight Test Power Panel. In 1983, NASA 905 was repainted. The single blue line on a white fuselage replaced the American Airlines tricolor design. NASA 905 ferried Space Shuttle Enterprise and the 5 operational shuttle Artilers between the launch and landing sites and other locations. It flew 70 of the 87 ferry missions during the 30 years of the Space Shuttle program, including 46 of 54 post-mission ferry flights to the Kennedy Space Center. In November 1990, NASA acquired a second Boeing 747, designated NASA 911, to use as a SCA shuttle carrier aircraft.
for the one upstairs.
This is a full-scale space shuttle replica named Independence. It is not a flown orbiter, but it is extremely detailed and built to full shuttle dimensions. We can tour the inside, which is rare for shuttle exhibits. Highlights include the flight deck reconstruction, mid-deck with sleeping bunks, cargo bay displays, hands-on exhibits explaining shuttle systems. This orbiter sits on top of the shuttle carrier aircraft in Independence Plaza. The Space Center Houston store. As we step out from the main exhibit halls of Space Center Houston, still buzzing from the rumble of simulated rocket engines, the glow of lunar modules, and the quiet majesty of astronaut artifacts, we follow a corridor that widens into a bright, welcoming space. Before we even cross the threshold, we notice the soft metallic gleam of NASA logos, a sweep of silver, white, and deep space black. We are in the Space Center Houston store, the final mission stop for many visitors, and in its own way, a gallery of wonders. The entrance feels like you're walking into a hybrid of a museum, a futuristic marketplace, and a celebration of human exploration. Warm light spills across racks of clothing, tables of collectibles, and gleaming walls covered in mission patches and photos of spaceflight history. The soft sounds of visitors browsing blend with the distant hum of the center's atmosphere. It's calm here, but still alive with curiosity. Walking deeper into the store, the first thing that catches our attention is the NASA apparel zone. Mannequins stand proudly wearing flight jackets, astronaut-style jumpsuits, and sleek black hoodies embroidered with the iconic meatball NASA insignia. Nearby are shelves lined with t-shirts celebrating Apollo, Shuttle, Artemis. Almost every major era of exploration represented in wearable form. A display of children's astronaut costumes gleams nearby. Tiny helmets, gloves, spacesuits, perfect replicas of astronaut gear scaled down for dreamers just beginning their journey. A wall filled from floor to ceiling displays the mission patch collection. From Mercury to Artemis, the history of human spaceflight unfolds as embroidered symbols of courage and ambition. Visitors stand silently here, tracing the patches with their eyes, perhaps remembering the missions, or perhaps imagining the ones still to come. A few steps later, we enter the realm of models and replicas. Here we are greeted by beautifully crafted scale models of spacecraft, Mercury capsules, Gemini modules, Apollo command and service modules, Space Shuttle orbiters, and gleaming Saturn V rockets daggering toward the ceiling. Some models are intricate collector's editions, with thousands of tiny details. Others are hands-on kits perfect for younger enthusiasts. There is even an entire shelf dedicated to Artemis hardware, capturing the excitement of NASA's return to the moon and its vision for Mars. Thanks so much for joining us on this incredible journey through Space Center Houston. From walking beneath the mighty Saturn V to exploring the International Space Station Gallery, to standing face-to-face with the shuttle carrier aircraft and Independence, this place is truly a celebration of human exploration. If you enjoyed this visit, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss the next adventure. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep looking up, stay curious, and we will see you on the next journey.